Welcome to In-Depth Conversations. Today, we live in a very fast-changing world where ideas are not always only debated in lecture halls, but rather online, on YouTube, and in podcasts, on social media, and so on. Lectures are even streamed online. So it seems like you can have knowledge available at your fingertips anytime, anywhere. And even just by asking ChatGPT, for example, you can have readily available knowledge. But meanwhile, philosophy, one of humanity's oldest pursuits of knowledge, continues its long tradition of questioning and reflection within the walls of university, within the institutions. But what does it mean then to study philosophy in this rapidly shifting landscape? What role can the philosophers still play between academic institutions and the public sphere? And how can reflection survive in an age of constant distraction? In this episode, we're going to speak to our guest, Hubert Hågemark, who is a doctoral student here at Lund University in theoretical philosophy. His research explores meaning, communication, and understanding in both human and non-human context. He's drawing on cognitive science and even evolutionary perspectives. We're going to talk about what drew him to philosophy, his path through academia, how he's navigating that, and how he sees philosophy's place and the future of philosophy in this world that's so fast-moving, perhaps even faster than thought itself. So welcome to In-Depth Conversation, Hubert.
Thank you.
Let us just begin by getting to know you a bit. What made you want to pursue your PhD, in particular in philosophy and philosophy of language?
So I can start by saying that I really try to stay away from philosophy.
Okay.
So I started taking a freestanding course in philosophy, and I really liked it, but I didn't have any plan to continue with philosophy. So I started to a program in psychology to become a clinical psychologist. Mm-hmm. I didn't really find it that interesting. So I quit, and then I continued with philosophy, and I thought, let's take a bachelor in philosophy and then do something else. I took a bachelor, and then I continued with cognitive science. But then I thought again, okay, I didn't find it that interesting, or at least not sort of what I wanted to do. So then I decided to continue with philosophy, and then I took a master, and then I pursued a PhD.
What was it about philosophy that made you keep coming back to it? So you said it was, in the beginning you said it was interesting, but then you didn't want to continue. What was that interest that you felt?
I mean, it's a bit hard to sort of say, and it's to some extent like some sort of rationalization that I do after. But I think I was fascinated about the argumentation, to really go to the core of things, don't assume stuff. So really go deep into the argumentation and be precise in that. That is what I liked most with philosophy. And it was very challenging as well.
Yeah, interesting that you're pursuing something that has this challenging aspect, right?
Exactly. I thought it was hard, it was difficult, so it was a challenge to continue.
Okay, and that was appealing to you.
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, wonderful. And then in particular, what you're researching is, well, within the subject of philosophy of language.
Right, yeah.
Can you tell us a bit more about your research project?
Yeah, so, I mean, the overall question I would say is what it means to communicate, how we should understand communication, and what it means to have an intention to communicate. And closely related to that is questions related to meaning, and that is very important in philosophy of language. So what it takes to mean something by uttering something. So we know that there is a difference between linguistic meaning and meaning something by uttering a linguistic expression.
What's that meaning for people who don't know?
So say that today is like a quite gray day, and it was raining a bit when I was going to the office, and if I would utter something like, "Oh, what wonderful weather it is today," the linguistic meaning would simply be "what wonderful weather," right? But what I would mean by uttering this would be this is rather terrible weather, or something like that. And this is quite fascinating. So how is it possible to mean something that is not covered by the linguistic meaning?
By what's actually, like the actual words that are said?
Exactly, yeah. So the linguistic meaning is the meaning of the words and how they are combined, roughly. So, and then that is something different from what I actually mean by uttering those words. And then this is very closely related to communication, because it's usually when I communicate, I mean something, and then you understand what I mean. And this is the sort of overall research questions that I tackle in my dissertation.
Just reminds me of this classical example where when you say, let me not mess it up now, but about I want some salt, isn't it?
Right.
Like when you say you're at the dinner table and you say, I would like some salt.
Exactly.
And then you're expecting the person to actually pass the salt.
Right, exactly.
Is that kind of a good example?
So if you say something like, can I have some salt, or is there any salt? It is usually assumed that when you do that, you also sort of ask for them to give you the salt.
Right. So there's more meaning to
exactly
just what's said.
Exactly.
This is very interesting because in many cases I feel like maybe in science, but in particular in philosophy, aren't we just trying to say, or at least in written text, right? We're trying to be so precise with what we mean that it has to somehow match the words. Is there something to that where we're expected to have only one kind of meaning rather than these two kinds of meanings that generally happens in communication?
Right. Yeah. No, I think in science and philosophy that we try at least to be as precise as possible, and to it's usually about like information, so it is like declarative, so it's statements basically. So yes, I would say that. But then of course also philosophical writings and scientific writing takes place within a context, within a scientific context, and this context helps also to understand what is sort of meant by certain sentences.
Absolutely fascinating. I think we could we can make a whole episode just on your research. You have to come back and we'll do that. But let's go back to just what I was talking about in the introduction about this changing media landscape that we have, or actually the changing world, it seems like, because we've had a new invention introduced, internet, and how that spreads information and knowledge, how we seek knowledge is very, very different today. I would claim, at least. I think most people would agree with me that that's generally feeling, especially if you haven't grown up really with social media the way that it seems now, like the kids are growing up with it. And of course, the elephant in the room, the introduction of ChatGPT or LLMs that can give you the information that you need in a compact way, or it can present it in a ready way that before you had to actually search for yourself and come to conclusions yourself. It seems like we're cutting out that process now and we just have this delivered to us. So I'm just curious here, or I think in many interesting ways it does link to your research, of course. When we talk about meaning, for example, in social media and so on, we don't apply maybe always this precise language that we expect from scientists or philosophers. So how can, first of all, do you agree with that picture that I'm painting here of a difference between these two worlds and way of looking at things?
So you mean like the media landscape now compared to before?
Has it affected communication or like how we seek information and knowledge?
I'm sure it has, but I would say that it probably feels sort of the same function now as before as well.
Okay.
So
yeah, a lot of people have likened different types of social media, like X, for example, to like the marketplace of ideas, right? Like that before we talked about the square,
exactly.
where people were meeting and gossiping and exchanging information, and now we just do it online instead, with all these comments and stuff. But okay, so you see that it's kind of the same, even though it's a new medium. So to speak.
I think the medium has very important consequences, of course, but the function is the same. That people want to share ideas. People want to sort of get inspiration and information about topics that are relevant to their world and to their lives. And then, of course, depending on the format, the medium, this is gonna have also, of course, consequences of like how much you engage in it. But you mentioned that now maybe people are maybe like taking this sort of message without sort of critically engaging in it. And I'm not sure that I would agree with that. Maybe that is the case, but I mean, before it was probably that they got the message delivered from like maybe a priest, for instance, and now they get it from a podcaster. And so I don't think that maybe it's a huge difference there.
One thing that we see more and more, I think, is academics being invited to different podcasts. Case in point, a little bit meta here. But I don't know if it's just my feed, but I get recommended a lot of these kind of episodes where these public intellectuals, they've become almost like public intellectuals, but are invited to speak on podcasts and are able to have these deeper conversations because of the format that podcast provides and YouTube and so on. Do you see that becoming necessary for academics to get involved with that? Is that a changing role that you have to consider perhaps more than your supervisors or the professors at your institution?
So I think like two things there. So first of all, I think this is like a very good example of where academics engaging in the public discourse is where they actually fill an important function. So they help to share their knowledge about certain stuff, and then people are interested in this information. And I think this is something that we in general should embrace. It means that people are curious, and it is an accessible way for people to get information. When it comes to if academics should do this, I think it is not something that is necessary. It is based on if the person, the individual, feels like some sort of call for this. If they do, go for it. But if the person just wants to sort of work with a certain topic for the sake of knowledge, for its own sake, then I think that's fine as well.
One thing that I see is different though with these public intellectuals that are invited to podcasts is usually that they're often invited to comment on all kinds of things, rather than just specifically on their research, which I mean, it's always been part of the academic's life, kind of to communicate their findings and what they're researching on. But it seems like we're having this broader interest in hearing people talk about all kinds of like political issues and things perhaps that's not relevant precisely to what their research is. Do you see that as a problem or something good because people do want to hear from us, or should we stick to what we know?
That's an interesting question, and it's a difficult one. So I would say that I don't think this is something that has changed. So I think before it was also the case that people talked about matters that was outside their competence. But then, of course, if you are an academic, you develop some sort of general critical thinking, hopefully at least, and that you can apply to fields that is not your specific field as well. But of course, it is maybe better to sort of stick to an area where you are an expert in. But I also see that if you want to sort of be engaged publicly a lot, then you need to, you create some sort of a brand of yourself, and then you cannot just talk about one specific matter. So I think it is a practical difficulty in just being engaged in one area, because then the sort of the outreach will be less, I would assume. So then it would be more that academics are invited to speak about a certain matter. It's not that they would have their own YouTube channel, for instance. And I guess academics that have their own YouTube channel or podcast that also feels some sort of function in society. Although we should be a bit more critical towards this, of course.
Okay. Do you see challenges there maybe? I'm thinking of in specific, there might be a blurring of the line between what makes you an authority on a subject, or I don't know, I know a lot of people do see personalities that have become very famous and very important in this sort of forums, like podcasters, influencers, and so on. And do you see any challenges for somebody who's within an institution to still have authority if that's what they're engaged with? Or
yeah, no, definitely, definitely, because their authority in one area will probably be perceived as some sort of like covering different areas. So it will be generalized, and that is definitely a problem, I would say. So then I think we should not see the person maybe as an expert or like an authority, but maybe more we should see them as a public figure, as someone else, like a politician that is talking about a lot of different subjects, rather than a scientist, maybe, at least when it comes to this. So if you want to be sort of like really like just a scientist, then you maybe should stick to the area that you're expert in, and then if you go beyond that, then you become something else, I would say.
Do you think people are good at what's your general feeling? Like, I know obviously you haven't done any research on it specifically, but what's your general feeling? I'm just curious, because we have a bit of an age gap, and what's your feeling of how good people are at navigating this? Just people in general.
So the academics or the people that
knowing the difference, not necessarily the academics themselves, but people outside of academia who do consume and are interested and curious and consume this media. Do they know this difference, or are they good at it?
I think people are quite bad at this. I would guess, yeah. So it is a problem for sure.
Why do you think that is? Like, given your cognitive background, why do you think that is that makes this difficult for people to separate or navigate?
I mean, we're not that precise and critical in our thinking, I would say. And so you see someone as an expert, he's a professor in this, and then you sort of like have some sort of trust toward that person in general. So I think it is quite difficult to sort of think that, okay, this person is professor in this subject, now the person is talking on something else, I shouldn't trust the person. So this is maybe too much to expect. So I think this is like one reason why it is problematic. But then again, I don't think this is something that is unique for our time. So this has been the case before as well. And also that, it fills some sort of function or role in society, because otherwise I guess it wouldn't be that popular.
Right. Yeah. It seems like it's there is a desire for people to engage with it. And did you? I mentioned in the beginning that philosophy, it's one of the oldest disciplines, right? And it is a discipline, but it's also sort of something. And I don't know if you've experienced this, but that people have a lot of opinions on, like usually the topics that philosophy covers, because it is about, let's say, communication, right? That's what your research is on. It's something we're all engaged in every day. We don't every day, look at microscopic electrons and things like that. So we do tend to take a physicist's word for whatever they're saying. Do you see a challenge there with philosophy in particular, trying to communicate why philosophers fill an important function and role that you can't just intuitively know about? Or is there even such a need?
So the question is if like the role of philosophy, and that is sort of the public discourse, or the public is sort of engaged in similar questions as philosophers, and that sort of makes it harder to separate, or
yeah, to get people to understand why you're important to talk about this. Like, what is your expertise to talk about this?
Okay, I see. Yeah.
Do people usually know?
So I think one problem with philosophy is that the public sort of view of philosophy is maybe a bit distorted, in the sense that it is people maybe have the view of philosophy as like everything goes. I have this opinion, you have this opinion, this is my philosophy, this is your philosophy. And in the academia, this is not how philosophy is done. So in academia, it's the focus is on argumentation, on logic. If you say something without having any arguments for what you're saying, then it's going to be very hard to survive in academia. And this is something that I don't think people in general understand about philosophy. So there is a difference in how philosophy is actually practiced at universities compared to people's view of philosophy. And of course, that also makes it harder to engage in a philosophical discussion publicly, because maybe people will be more skeptical towards philosophers then. I would say that what is unique about philosophy is the tool. So even if people are sort of engaged in questions that are philosophical to some extent, the tool that philosophers have are this precise thinking, the argumentation. So what philosophers can contribute with is this very precise thinking. So even if a lot of people are interested in questions about communication, what I hopefully at least can provide is a more sort of detailed argumentation about how to look at communication. And this extends to other philosophical questions as well, like knowledge, what is sort of ethical, normative, and stuff like this, that what philosophers can contribute with is the precise thinking. Although this is questions that people are to some extent engaged with, even if they're not philosophers.
Yeah. I'm really enjoying that tension. Like I think that's the really beautiful thing about philosophy, that it does start off with intuition, like questioning the intuitions and things that people just assume, right? Yeah. And then trying to make, or actually what we're successfully done, I think, is made a science out of those questions.
Right. Yeah.
And like you said, applying these tools that we've developed since Aristotle, right?
Exactly.
Do you think it's something that anybody can learn, and should they learn more of this, or is it more a specialized knowledge that's not really for everybody, maybe?
So I would say that everyone could become better at it. Then, of course, if you have it as a profession, then this is your job to work with argumentation, work with breaking down arguments. So, of course, this is a skill that you develop the more you work with it. But I definitely think that people in general have the ability to critical thinking, and this is something that is also practiced, in many different disciplines, although maybe philosophy is the one that sort of goes to the most extreme when it comes to critical thinking. But yes, definitely, like that. This is something that can be practiced without outside philosophy, and it's something that we should encourage as well, I think.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's I think right.
And I think that the role then of philosophy, if we go back to like this podcast and the media, is maybe not to provide answers to things, but help to clarify the conceptual landscape, the logical landscape, if you want to say that. And that means that you help to break down arguments to say, okay, this position has this pros, it has these cons. If you take another position, this is also going to have certain problems, and then you will sort of make this clear to the people, and then create some sort of transparency in the political debate, for instance, and then let people decide for themselves. Okay, so I see there is some sort of weakness in this position, but I think this weakness is not as sort of devastating, let's say.
I think this is a really brilliant way forward, I think, to see philosophy's role this way. Traditionally, I mean, if you look at old classical YouTube videos of how philosophers were interviewed in TV media and stuff like that, the traditional media forums, it would be these really cool interviews, but specifically on philosophy. So I don't know if you've seen, like, is his name Brian McGee, a really good TV program during the 70s, I think it was. And they had these amazing philosophers on, like John Searle and Hilary Putnam, like all the greats. But they were asked about specifically philosophy of mind and like their topics, you know, and which is also really interesting and fascinating, but it's a very high level. So I don't think it appeals to a lot of people maybe who are not studying philosophy. But this new role, as you say, on like providing the skills for how to look at and talk about current issues that people are interested in, I think is fascinating, and I would love to see more of that. I'm thinking maybe, and you should correct me if I'm wrong, I'm thinking of people like Alex O'Connor, I think his name is, who's a YouTuber. Do you know who it is?
I don't think so.
Okay, but I think he has some kind of master's in philosophy, and I've seen him on other podcasts, and I think he really applies this, where he talks about, he has debates even with people and talk about current issues, but debating them, sort of showing the inconsistencies in thinking and so on. So I think more of that would be very fascinating. And
that would be fantastic, I would say. And so, I mean, if you look at many television programs, also like it was like a political debate in Sweden recently among the different political party leaders, and it was I mean, it was maybe not of the highest intellectual quality.
Yeah, I watched that as well.
Yeah, it was a bit painful.
Yeah.
and I think that this is a big problem, I would say, and this is maybe to some extent maybe more problematic now than before, that the media landscape really pushes these short videos and where you have like one message and then you really like just want to
just for people who didn't watch it, what exactly what things did you find problematic with this
so what I found especially problematic is that there were no real argumentation. So they just they said stuff, they maybe had like some political view, and they just wanted to express this. And then they were debating one thing, but then they just wanted to say like one thing that they have in their like one policy that they are favoring. So
it sounded very rehearsed, right? At some
exactly,
points,
yeah, exactly, yeah. So they were not really engaging in an argumentation, and I think if we can contribute to with a clear, transparent argumentation in the political debate and in society in general, this is something that I think is very helpful. And I also think that people want this to some extent. So, I mean, if you take YouTube, for instance, there's a lot of YouTube videos that are very long, that are, I mean, they maybe are accessible in some sense, but it's also, they can go quite deep into certain topics. And this is something that a lot of young people, for instance, follow and spend a lot of time to learn certain stuff. So I think there is that people want to have like a more, to listen to the arguments, to see the weakness, the strength of certain positions. So I think if philosophers can contribute with making the different arguments clearer, this is something that would be very helpful.
Right. Yeah. That's a nice. I see that as a really nice place for philosophers.
Right. Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
That would be great. Maybe continuing on that, then, do you see that? What do you see as the future for philosophy, on like institutionalized philosophy? So we've talked a lot about the what we call in Sweden the third task of the academic, right?
Yeah.
To do this public outreach
Yeah.
and communicate
Like this.
our yeah, exactly. Like this would be one example of doing that. How do you see the role of institutional philosophy going forward? Is there something that needs to change, or to put this more how should I say it, to be more useful, or should it just continue as it's always done, and then whoever feels like applying it more to society can do that? Or how do you see that?
So I don't have any strong views on this matter, but I think.
But sorry, let me rephrase the question a little bit specifically to you, because you are a PhD in the middle of your journey, and what I'm curious about is, how do you feel being in the middle of your PhD journey? Are you do you feel like there are ways for you to do both in a good and effective way, or do you have to sort of choose one, being this public intellectual person, and also, or do you have to choose sort of more a institutionalized way of continuing your career?
So my approach to this is that it always kind of depend on the individual. So I'm a bit sort of skeptical to push philosophers to go like sort of engage more publicly. So I think it's something that has to come from the person themselves. Yeah, this is I'm not sure exactly why, but I think it should come natural, and it should be something that also fits the person.
Right.
And some philosophers are maybe more fit to sort of be in their room, their office, and just read and write. And that's fine as well, I think.
And that's also, I mean, a medium to write, right? Like it's a very classical way of communicating knowledge and ideas. But do you see strengths with continuing being part of an institution, like an old institution, this way? Is that or is that being eroded? Because we were a little bit touching on that, like this blurring of lines of what the expertise is, and having the professor title or PhD title comes with being connected to a university.
Right. Yeah.
Does that still have weight and importance today?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
So, but it depends in what area. So it definitely has some sort of weight when it comes to the personal reputation for that person, and it means that they are, to some extent, maybe respected in their field, and also that they cannot engage publicly without sort of they have to sort of also think about their reputation in academia, which is something good to some extent.
Right. I agree with that. All right, Hubert, I think we've touched on so many interesting topics, and I definitely wanted to come back and have a conversation about your
that would be nice.
Deeper into your actual research as well, even though we've talked about subjects sort of around it. But yes, super interesting, and thank you for sharing all your thoughts on this matter. I think it's a lot of food for thought, and yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure.